Hello again, Planeswalkers. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic, bringing you another deck tech video. Today we're talking about Hythonia the Cruel. But before we do, a quick reminder. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. So Hythonia is 4 and 2 black for a 4/6 Gorgon with Death Touch, and she has Monstrosity 3, so you can pay 6 and 2 black, and if she isn't monstrous, you put 3+1/+1 counters on her and she becomes monstrous. When Hythonia the Cruel becomes monstrous, destroy all non-Gorgon creatures. So the first thing that pops into everyone's mind when they see this card is Gorgon Tribal, right? And she would be great in that deck except for one thing. That deck doesn't exist. There are only 16 Gorgons in all of Magic, and only 10 are mono black, and only 5 of those are remotely worth playing. I hope Wizards starts to print more Gorgons, but for now, they are extremely undersupported, even with the addition of the latest changelings from Modern Horizons. So like most of us, I looked at Hythonia and said, sure, that would be good, but no. I mean, seriously, to this day, she only has 33 decks on EDH Rec. 33! That is like one of the lowest rate of deck builds I have ever seen. So I put Hythonia to the side, and over the years, I would constantly go back to this card and wonder, could this be a good deck? The desire to build a deck around her always came back, but the reality of Gorgon Tribal always deterred me. And finally, one day, it happened. I felt like such a fool. How did I not see it before? If we just ditch the idea that this is a Gorgon Tribal commander, we can make a really cool board wipe deck. That's right, this deck is all about just killing stuff. More specifically, the goal of this deck is to blow up our opponent's creatures and then bring them back under our control. At first, I did include some Gorgons, but in the end they got cut because they just didn't really do enough. What is so cool, though, is that our deck has multiple creatures that can regenerate, and also creatures that are indestructible. Still, Hythonia kills most of our creatures, but that doesn't really matter, because it's not like we're going to be making her monstrous every turn anyway. In reality, we would be lucky if we made her monstrous more than 2 times in a single game. So the goal is to wait for the perfect moment. Wait for when it's going to hurt your opponents the most, and preferably when you can benefit by reanimating all of their creatures. Another way to build this deck would be to have creatures that all do things when they die, but I decided to focus more on my opponent's creatures dying than my own. As far as stats go, Hythonia is a little expensive, but being a 4/6 with Death Touch is really good because it means she is very often going to survive attacking, because the opponent will be reluctant to block her with more than one creature. Remember, if a player blocks with more than one creature, the attacking player decides how combat damage is assigned, and the damage can be divided up in any way. So for example, if Hythonia was blocked by 4 2/2 creatures, she could kill all of them by assigning 1 Death Touch damage to each of them. So when people say that having high power with Death Touch is superfluous, I disagree. It makes the creature much harder to multi-block. And obviously when she becomes a monstrous 7/9, she is terrifying. That's a 3-hit clock. The last thing I want to say before we begin is that obviously this is not some crazy, overpowered, win every game kind of deck. This is a janky, against the odds kind of deck. Yeah, for sure, but it's also a lot of fun, and it definitely can win games out of nowhere. So let's get into the deck, starting with the creatures. And our first creature is actually a land. It's Westvale Abbey, which is a land that taps to add 1 colorless mono to your mana pool, where you can pay 5 and tap it and pay 1 life to put a 1/1 white and black human cleric creature token onto the battlefield. Finally, you can pay 5, tap it, and sacrifice 5 creatures to transform Westvale Abbey into Ormendal Profane Prince and untap it. So Ormendal Profane Prince is a 9/7 legendary demon with flying, lifelink, indestructible, and haste. So this is just a huge creature. You do have to sacrifice some creatures to get it out, so you're still not going to get it out until probably a bit later in the game. But what's really cool is that it's indestructible, which means it's going to survive Hythonia becoming monstrous. That's awesome. Also, having haste is really cool. It's like having an extra combat step. Next we have Death Greeter, 1 black for a 1/1 human shaman that says whenever another creature dies, you may gain 1 life. So this is in here just for whenever somebody board wipes, we're going to be gaining a ton of life, even though Death Greeter is going to be dying as well. This can gain us a ton of life over the course of the game, not only through our own dex tricks, but just from other people, playing the game. Lots of creatures die in this game, so that's great. We need to gain life because eventually we're going to want to pay life to do things like draw cards. Next we have Blood Artist, 1 and a black for a 0/1 vampire that says whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So similar to Death Greeter, we're just counting on creatures dying in this game, and that's going to gain us a ton of life. But also, Blood Artist drains an opponent of life, and that's huge. That can kill somebody really quick. Next we have Yeheni, Undying Partisan, 2 and a black for a 2/2 Aetherborn Vampire with haste, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yeheni, Undying Partisan. And you can sacrifice another creature, and Yeheni gains indestructible until the end of the turn. So this is perfect for our deck. Number one, it's going to get huge whenever Hythonia goes monstrous, because lots of our opponent's creatures are going to die, but also it can survive Hythonia going monstrous by becoming indestructible. Also, being a sacrifice outlet is always really important in Commander, just being able to sacrifice a creature instead of having our opponent gain control of it or exile it or enchant it is really helpful. So Yeheni is one of my favorite black sacrifice outlets in the game, and I also love that he has haste, get that extra combat step in right away. That's awesome. Next we have Cryptghast, 3 and a black for a 2/2 spirit with Extort. So whenever you cast a spell, you may pay an additional white or black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. And whenever you tap a swamp for mana, add an additional black mana to your mana pool. So Cryptghast is amazing at helping us ramp. It also helps us drain our opponents of life. That also means it's going to be a pretty big target, so if you have any way to protect it, it's a good choice for protection, because your opponents are seeing that not only are you doubling all of your mana, but you're also using that mana to drain them of life. So yeah, it's a pretty big target, but a great card. Next we have Dimir Houseguard, 3 and a black for a 2/3 skeleton with fear, so it can only be blocked by black creatures or artifact creatures, and you can sacrifice a creature to regenerate Dimir Houseguard. So again, we want regenerate in this deck so that our creatures can survive Hythonia going monstrous. And Dimir Houseguard also has Transmute, so if you pay 1 and 2 black, you can discard this card to search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Play only as a sorcery. So with Dimir Houseguard, we are able to tutor up any 4-drop we want. So let's continue on with the 4-drop creatures. We have Twilight Prophet, 2 and 2 black for a 2/4 Vampire Cleric with Flying and Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the City's Blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. So this is mostly in here just for some extra card draw and to drain our opponents of a little bit of life so we can gain some life and hopefully eventually pay that life to do things like draw cards and other shenanigans. Next we have Erebos, God of the Dead, 3 and a black for a 5/7 legendary enchantment creature god with Indestructible. Again, important to have Indestructible with Hythonia. And as long as your devotion to black is less than 5, Erebos isn't a creature. Each black mana symbol in the cost of permanents you control counts towards your devotion to black. So if we had all 4 of these cards on the screen on the battlefield, our devotion to black would be 6. And Erebos also says your opponents can't gain life, and finally you can pay 2 mana and pay 2 life to draw a card. So in Commander, we start with plenty of life, so Erebos can already draw us a ton of cards. But with other life-gaining cards like Twilight Prophet, Erebos can draw us even more. So gaining life, pretty important. Next we have Corlash, Heir to Blackblade, which is an XX zombie warrior. Corlash, Heir to Blackblade's power and toughness are each equal to the number of swamps you control. And you can pay 1 and a black to regenerate Corlash. And it also has this grandeur ability, which only matters if you're running 4 copies of it in the deck, which obviously we can't in Commander. But what I love about Corlash is it's just potentially a huge creature that we can regenerate, and that's exactly what we want for Hythonia the Cruel. So next we have Corpse Augur, which is 3 and a black for a 4/2 zombie wizard, and it says when Corpse Augur dies, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of creature cards in target player's graveyard. So you choose the target player as this ability goes on the stack, but you determine the value of X as the ability resolves. So say you targeted yourself and Corpse Augur is still in the graveyard, its ability will count itself. At the same time, if you have a board wipe and Corpse Augur dies, all the cards that just died will count towards Corpse Augur's ability, depending on whose graveyard you're choosing. But it's not just going to count the cards that were in the player's graveyard before the board wipe, is what I'm saying. So really great card for this deck and could potentially draw you a ton of cards. Next we have Ravenous Chupacabra, 4 and 2 black for a 2/2 beast horror. And when Ravenous Chupacabra enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls. Just what we want. Next we have Sangromancer, 2 and 2 black for a 3/3 vampire shaman with flying. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may gain 3 life. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. So Sangromancer, if that's on the board when there's a board wipe, that's going to gain you a ton of life. So really helpful with Hythonia the Cruel, just going to gain us a bunch of life. And what mono black deck would be complete without Gary? Grey Merchant of Asphodel, 3 and 2 black for a 2/4 zombie that says when Grey Merchant of Asphodel enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. So in a mono black deck, Grey Merchant of Asphodel can just win you the game kind of almost all by itself if you have enough devotion to black. But even if not, this can drain your opponents of so much, it's definitely going to be putting you ahead. Next we have God Eternal Bantu, 3 and 2 black for a 5/6 zombie god with menace. When God Eternal Bantu enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of other permanents, then draw that many cards. When God Eternal Bantu dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So Bantu is mainly in this deck for that last ability, for when he dies, you put him back into your library. Just exactly what we want with the Hythonia deck. Also, the ability to sacrifice some creatures and draw cards is pretty helpful, and having a 5/6 with menace is nothing to joke about. Next we have Sidisi Undead Vizier, 3 and 2 black for a 4/6 zombie naga with death touch and exploit. When this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. And when Sidisi sacrifices or exploits a creature, you may search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So this is a nice tutor on a creature. We do have to sacrifice a creature, but we can always choose to sacrifice Sidisi herself. And so kind of a more budget option if you're looking for tutors, budget compared to like Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor and things like that. I like Sidisi, she's good. Next we have Karen Wanderer, 4 and a black for a 4/4 shapeshifter with changeling. This card is every creature type at all times, so I guess I lied. We do have one Gorgon in the deck. It's Karen Wanderer, because it's every creature type. And as long as a creature card with flying is in a graveyard, Karen Wanderer has flying. The same is true of Fear, First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Land Walk, Lifelink, Protection, Reach, Trample, Shroud, and Vigilance. Keep in mind that this says in a graveyard, not just our graveyard, in any graveyard. And that's exactly what this deck wants to do, is just fill up the graveyards with creatures. So Karen Wanderer can have a ton of abilities on a 4/4 body. That's great. Next we have Krav the Unredeemed, 4 and a black for a 3/3 demon. It partners with Regna, but because Regna's white, we don't have Regna in the deck. But Krav says you can pay a black and sacrifice X creatures. Target player draws X cards and gains X life. Put X +1/+1 counters on Krav the Unredeemed. So Krav is just another great sacrifice outlet that can potentially draw us cards and gain us life. That's great. Moving along, we have Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, 4 and 2 black for a 5/4 rat ninja with ninjutsu 5. So you can pay 3 and 2 black to return an unblocked attacker you control to hand. Put this card onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. And whenever Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And for 1 and a black, you can regenerate Ink Eyes. So this is perfect for our deck. We're going to be killing our opponent's creatures and hopefully reanimating them with cards like Ink Eyes. And we can regenerate Ink Eyes as well, which is fabulous with Hythonia. Next we have Harvester of Souls, 4 and 2 black for a 5/5 Death Touch Demon. And whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. Next we have Massacre Worm, 3 and 2 black for a 6/5 worm. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/2 until the end of the turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, that player loses 2 life. Spooky, very spooky. Next we have Toxic Nim, 4 and 2 black for a 4/1 zombie with Infect. This creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters. And if a player ends up with 10 or more poison counters, they just lose the game right there. Pretty sick. And you can pay 1 black to regenerate Toxic Nim. So it's going to survive a board wipe, and now that your opponent's blockers are all out of the way, it's going to be able to get in that infect damage. So definitely a card that can win you some games. Next we have Kokusho the Evening Star, 4 and 2 black for a 5/5 Dragon Spirit with flying, and when Kokusho the Evening Star dies, each opponent loses 5 life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. So this is one of our few, we care about when it dies cards. Again, you could build the whole deck this way and build your whole deck with creatures that do things when they die. I definitely had to have at least a couple of them in here. Kokusho is fabulous and can drain our opponents of a ton of life, gaining us a ton of life. Next we have Tetsamok, Primal Death, 4 and 2 black for a 6/6 Elder Dinosaur with Death Touch, and you can pay a black and reveal Tetsamok Primal Death from your hand. Put a prey counter on target creature, activate this ability only during your turn. When Tetsamok enters the battlefield, destroy each creature your opponents control with a prey counter on it. So I wouldn't necessarily call this like a board wipe on a creature, though obviously it could be. Normally you're going to be hitting, 1 or 2, maybe 3 creatures at best with Tetsamok, and that's great. That's fine. Killing 3 creatures and getting a 6/6 Death Touch creature onto the battlefield, that's excellent. And, we don't have to cast Tetsamok on the same turn where we reveal them from our hand. We can just be building it up turn by turn, putting prey counters everywhere, and then eventually maybe it will be a one-sided board wipe. Next we have Deathbringer Regent, 5 and 2 black for a 5/6 Flying Dragon. When Deathbringer Regent enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand and there are 5 or more creatures on the battlefield, destroy all other creatures. Next we have Runescarred Demon, 5 and 2 black for a 6/6 Flying Demon. When Runescarred Demon enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. A lot less expensive than Demonic Tutor or Vampiric Tutor, and it gets us a 6/6 Flying Demon as well. Next we have a card which I always have trouble pronouncing, Sepulchral Primordial. So Sepulchral Primordial is 5 and 2 black for a 5/4 Avatar with Intimidate, which means it can't be blocked except for by black creatures or artifact creatures. When Sepulchral Primordial enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. We could potentially get 3 creatures onto the battlefield for free with Sepulchral Primordial in this deck. That's excellent. Next we have Myojin of Night's Reach, 5 and 3 black for a 5/2 Legendary Spirit. Myojin of Night's Reach comes into play with a divinity counter on it if you played it from your hand. Myojin of Night's Reach is indestructible as long as it has a divinity counter on it, Finally, you can remove a divinity counter from it, and each opponent discards his or her hand. So this is in here because, I mean, number one, it's just a fabulous card in any black deck, really. Mainly, though, it's an indestructible creature, and those are really helpful. Next, we have Dread Cacodemon. 7 and 3 black, so 10 mana for an 8/8 demon. And when Dread Cacodemon enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all creatures your opponents control, and then tap all creatures you control. So, if you cast this second main phase after you've attacked, lots of your creatures are already going to be tapped anyway. So there's very little downside with Dread Cacodemon, just a straight up one-sided board wipe. That is so awesome. Alright, so now that we've got the creatures out of the way, let's talk about a few ways to protect them. So we have some equipment here. First, Ring of Zathrid. 2 mana for artifact equipment that you can equip for 1, and you can pay 2 mana to regenerate equipped creature. So this gives any one of our creatures that regenerate effect, which is exactly what we want. And it says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature if it's black. Hey, what do you know? All of our creatures are black, so that's awesome. Next we have Forebear's Blade. 3 mana for an equipment that's equipped 3. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has Vigilance and Trample. Whenever equipped creature dies, attach Forebear's Blade to target creature you control. So this is actually really great in the deck. Mainly, equipping this onto Hythonia gets just ridiculous. Having Vigilance, Death Touch, and Trample is huge. Mainly just having Death Touch and Trample means you only deal 1 damage to the blocking creature and all the rest of your damage goes over to the opponent. That's excellent. So Forebear's Blade doesn't necessarily protect Hythonia or our creatures, but is just super powerful in this deck with Hythonia. Next we have Darksteel Plate. 3 mana for an artifact equipment that you can equip for 2. Darksteel Plate is indestructible, and the equipped creature also is indestructible. So that's awesome. They can't even blow up the equipment. Moving along to our ramp, you might have noticed some of these spells are kind of expensive, so we have a little bit of ramp in the deck. Obviously, we have Soul Ring. Next, we have Bubbling Muck, which is a sorcery for 1 black that says until the end of the turn, whenever a player taps a swamp for mana, it produces an additional black mana. So this is High Tide for black. That's awesome. Next we have Jet Medallion, 2 mana for an artifact that says black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So if you're casting multiple spells in a turn, this can net you a ton of mana you're saving. Next we have Pristine Talisman, an artifact that you can tap to add a colorless, and you gain 1 life. So again, gaining life is important in this deck, so we can pay life to do other things. Next we have Bantu's Monument, 3 mana for an artifact that says black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Awesome. Next we have Hedron Archive, 4 mana for an artifact that you can tap to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool, similar to Soul Ring, or you can pay 2 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. Next we have Revel in Riches, 4 and a black for an enchantment that says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap and sacrifice this artifact to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Yeah. So having this on the battlefield and then monstrosizing Hythonia could potentially win you the game. And you can make a Hythonia monstrous at instant speed as well. So you just wait until the end step right before your turn, make Hythonia monstrous, kill your opponent's creatures, make a ton of tokens, and then start your turn and just win the game with Revel in Riches. Next we have Black Market, 3 and 2 black for an enchantment that says whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add a black mana to your mana pool for each charge counter on Black Market. So Black Market and Revel in Riches are both enchantments that can get you an insane amount of mana in black. Creatures just die in this game all the time, especially in Commander, long game format. You can have a ton of creatures die. I've seen Black Market get people 20 extra mana a turn. That's just excellent. Really great cards for this deck. Next we have Caged Sun, 6 mana for an artifact that says when it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1, and whenever a land's ability causes you to add one or more mana of the chosen color, add one additional mana of that color. So, pumping all of our black creatures up, +1/+1, and doubling all of our black mana. Awesome. Next is Charcoal Diamond, 2 mana for an artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it to add 1 black mana to your mana pool. Sweet. Next we have Mind Stone, an artifact for 2 mana that you can tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice it and draw a card. So sometimes you got plenty of mana, you just want to draw a card, so artifacts like this are really helpful. Next we have our removal. So these 3 removal spells you might notice are all exile spells. You know, we already have plenty of destroy stuff, so for our targeted removal stuff, I chose the exile removal. So first is Obnixilus's Cruelty, 2 and a black for an instant. Target creature gets -5/-5 until the end of the turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Normally -5/-5 is pretty much enough to kill almost any creature. Next we have Silence the Believers, 2 and 2 black for an instant with Strive. So Silence the Believers costs 3 more mana to cast for each target beyond the first. And it says exile any number of target creatures and all auras attached to them. Next we have Vraska's Contempt, 2 and 2 black for an instant. Exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. So Vraska's Contempt, I believe, just came down a lot in price, like down to like $5 or something, so buy them up now if you can. Moving along, we have Vona's Hunger, 2 and a black for an instant with Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. And it says each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, instead each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls rounded up. So this is really great at getting our opponents indestructible creatures, things of that nature. Yeah, just fabulous, kind of one-sided mini board wipe. Excellent card. Next we have Decree of Pain, 6 and 2 black for a sorcery that says destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated, draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. And you can cycle it for 5, so for 3 and 2 black, you discard this card and draw a card, and when you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2/-2 until the end of the turn. Next we have Necromantic Selection, 4 and 3 black for a sorcery that says destroy all creatures, then return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Exile Necromantic Selection. So very cool board wipe with a nice little bit of reanimation added to it. Next we have our Reanimation. So we got quite a bit of reanimation in this deck, all of which is focused on getting our opponent's creatures back. So first we have Animate Dead, which is 1 and a black for an enchantment aura, and it says enchant creature card in a graveyard. When Animate Dead enters the battlefield, if it's on the battlefield, it loses enchant creature card in a graveyard and gains enchant creature put onto the battlefield with Animate Dead. Return enchanted creature card to the battlefield under your control and attach Animate Dead to it. When Animate Dead leaves the battlefield, that creature's controller sacrifices it. An enchanted creature gets -1/-0. Gosh, they put so much text on these stupid cards. Basically, it's saying you put a creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield with an Animate Dead enchanting it, right? And when the enchantment dies, the creature dies as well. Next we have Dance of the Dead, pretty much same thing, 1 and a black. You grab a creature card from your graveyard and you put it onto the battlefield with Dance of the Dead enchanting it. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. At the beginning of the upkeep of the enchanted creature's controller, that player may pay 2 mana if he or she does untap that creature. So far both of these cards can get us any creature card from any graveyard, not just our own. Next we have Necromancy, 2 and a black for an enchantment. You may choose to play Necromancy as an instant. If you do, bury it at the end of the turn. When you play Necromancy, you choose a creature card in the graveyard, you put it onto the battlefield under your control, and you enchant Necromancy onto it. And all these are pretty much the same. They have different downsides, But Necromancy really doesn't have much of a downside at all. It's just if you want to play it as an instant, it has a downside. Otherwise, Necromancy is just awesome. Gets you any creature from any graveyard onto the battlefield. The similarity with all three of these is if they blow up the enchantment, the creature goes as well. Moving along, we have Reanimate. 1 black for a sorcery, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. So you could lose a little bit of life here, but just 1 black mana to get any creature card from anyone's graveyard, so cool. Next we have Thrilling Encore. 4 and a black for an instant, put onto the battlefield under your control all creature cards in all graveyards that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So obviously you want to play this after you make Hythonia monstrous, right? You kill all your opponent's creatures, get them all back on your control. That's awesome. Next we have Liliana Vess. 3 and 2 black for a Liliana Planeswalker. It's our only Planeswalker in the deck. It enters with 5 loyalty. For +1, target player discards a card. -2, search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. And finally, -8, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. So, this is mainly in here for that last effect, that Rise of the Dark Realms effect, getting all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under our control. That is just huge. It's often very hard to get this off, to get to -8, but Hythonia really helps with that, being a board wipe creature, Just having a board wipe on your commander really increases the chances that you can ultimate Liliana Vess. That's great. Next we have Grave Betrayal. 5 and 2 black for an enchantment that says whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other types. Yes, this is exactly the card we want in this deck. This is exactly the kind of enchantment we want on the battlefield when Hythonia goes monstrous, because then we're just going to get all of our opponent's creatures that died back on the battlefield under our control. Excellent. Next we have Fated Return. 4 and 3 black for an instant that says put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains indestructible. If it's your turn, you get to scry 2. This is such a cool card, getting any creature from any graveyard on the battlefield under our control and giving it indestructible. Next we have Boneyard Parlay. 5 and 2 black for a sorcery that says exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put all cards from the pile of your choice onto the battlefield under your control and the rest into their owner's graveyard. This is a card I don't think sees nearly enough play. Just selecting exactly the 5 creatures you want to choose from is so cool. This is definitely going to get you at least 1 creature, probably more like 2 or 3 creatures. That's really cool. And if you got an alliance with somebody, maybe they'll choose to put all 5 creatures into 1 pile and you can choose that pile. That could totally happen. Next we have Rise of the Dark Realms. 7 and 2 black for a sorcery, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Sweet. Then we have Nim Deathmantle. 2 mana for an artifact equipment. This isn't necessarily reanimation, so I kind of put it at the end here. This is more like just save your creatures. Really helpful with Kokusho and cards like that have death triggers. So Nim Deathmantle is equipped for 4. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. And the most important thing is it says whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4 mana. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Deathmantle to it. Next we have our draw card spells, starting with Damnable Pact. X black for a sorcery, target player draws X cards and loses X life. Next we have Phyrexian Arena. 1 and 2 black for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep you draw a card and lose 1 life. Not a bad deal in a format where you start out with 40 life. Finally we have Necrologia. 3 and 2 black for an instant. Necrologia can only be cast during your end step, and as an additional cost to cast Necrologia, pay X life. Draw X cards. So this is a really cool card. When you're about to do something like Rise of the Dark Realms or whatever, you draw like 20 cards and then you discard like 13 of them, and then you discard all the best creatures, and then you Rise of the Dark Realms, get all those creatures onto the battlefield. So that brings us to the lands. So we have 38 lands total. As I already mentioned, we have Westvale Abbey. Next we have Reliquary Tower. You have no maximum hand size, and it taps to add a colorless. So that's really helpful with cards like Necrologia, where we're just drawing a ton of cards. We don't want to have to discard them, unless maybe we're right about to reanimate everything. Next we have High Market, a land that taps to add 1 colorless, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. Next we have Temple of the False God, a land that taps to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. Well, we're in a long game format, so if you don't have 5 or more lands, you're probably just losing the game anyway. So Temple of the False God is a pretty great card. Next we have Everglades. Everglades enters the battlefield tapped. When Everglades enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an untapped swamp you control to its owner's hand. And it taps to add both colorless and a black to your mana pool. So hear me out. I like to put these cards in decks because I think they're actually pretty decent ramp on a land. So if you think about cards like Farseek, other normal ramp cards, you're normally paying something like 2 mana to get a land onto the battlefield, an extra land that is. And that's basically what cards like Everglades are doing. You're returning a land to your hand, so that's like you're using up 1 land, and this is entering the battlefield tapped, so that's like you're using your second land, and you're netting yourself an extra mana on the battlefield. So I think that's pretty great, and the land in your hand, you're going to be able to still play that the next turn. So I do like these cards. I put them in a lot of decks. Next we have Desert of the Glorified, which is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. It taps to add a black to your mana pool, or you can cycle it away for 1 and a black. So for 1 and a black, you can discard this card and draw a card. Cycling lands are really helpful in Commander because sometimes you just get flooded out, you have too many lands, and then you draw a cycling land and you say, okay, I can just discard this and draw a different card. Pretty helpful sometimes. Same thing with Baron Moor. It enters the battlefield tapped, taps to add a black to your mana pool, or you can cycle it away for 1 black. Next we have Cabal Stronghold, which is a land that taps to add a colorless, or you can pay 3 and tap it to add a black mana to your mana pool for each basic swamp you control. So we got quite a few swamps, as you'll see. Next we have Phyrexian Tower, which is a legendary land that taps to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to add 2 black mana to your mana pool. Next we have Shizo, Death's Storehouse, which is a legendary land that taps to add a black mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 black and tap it, and target legendary creature gains fear until the end of the turn. So that's pretty sweet with Hythonia, and when we're trying to get in that commander damage. Finally, we have 28 swamps, and that's it. That is my Hythonia the Cruel board wipe deck. So let me know what you think. If you have any suggestions, let me know. This is obviously a work in progress. Janky decks always are. So let me know what you think. If you enjoy this video, hey, please like and subscribe. It helps out a lot. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.